be a little informal. When I came in tonight, I'm like, it almost feels more like a support group. I don't know about anybody else, but it feels like it took a beating this week. But I also want this to be an encouragement to everybody, just to know what you're doing is right, and go with that. We're all working together. I know there's a lot about the exemptions and a lot about the mandates this week, and everybody's been through it. So I just want to start off with a word of prayer. So Father God, we just we thank you for this opportunity to come together. We thank you for this house of worship that's opened the doors for us to be here. We invite you, Holy Spirit, into this evening and into this time as we share and we give information. Lord, we just give this time to you, and we ask your blessing on it in Jesus' name. Amen. And like I said, it's going to be a little bit more informal. I don't know, Sean, if you have anything to speak on. Okay.
So, basically tonight, we want to hear from you guys, and we want to kind of get a game plan as to what are your thoughts as far as what's next, what do we do, how do we maneuver through this. I know there's probably exemption questions, and we have Chris Ewing that was here several times ago at Apollo Career Center and talked about exemptions and what that looks like, the legalities behind it. Because right now, this is geared for anybody, but right now the hospitals are faced with get the vaccination. I shouldn't say vaccination, right? Get the jab. I mean, or you can file for a medical exemption or a religious exemption, and they're quite exhaustive in how they're making you go through the process, which is ridiculous. The whole thing, number one, the whole thing of exemptions is wrong. Number two, the way they're making you go through it is wrong. And so there's so many incorrect things. But nonetheless, it's from my perspective, our perspective, it's a vehicle to get through this moment as we kind of try to maneuver through. So definitely, if there are questions on that, we want Chris to handle it, or however you want to do it. So really tonight is we want you guys to talk. So if you have specific questions. We were talking out in the hallway of this new article, and we don't want to make tonight about a bunch of education unless you have specific questions. But I'm going to see if Dr. Knight will just go ahead and share that article, because it's pretty important, and this is specific on how people you know that have had the jab that are now getting the booster. How many people do you know that have had the jab and the booster or the booster and have had an adverse reaction?
Everybody look around and see.
Yes, that's pretty many.
Yeah, that's crazy. I want to tell one thing real quick. I was doing some education last weekend, and I was working with a fellow. We were doing some procedures, and this fellow was vaccinated, and fellow means that they're another doctor. I don't know. It wasn't a fellow. It was actually a female. But anyway, this person was vaccinated, and we were talking, and some things came up. And here, after they got the shot, they started noticing that they were really fatigued. They just weren't feeling well. And then all of a sudden, they went to the doctor, and they were told they had high blood pressure. This is a 30-year-old healthy female that has nothing wrong with her, and she's a fellow in a residency program. And so, long story short, they did a battery of tests and found nothing. And so this is exactly what's happening. I said, did they tell you that was from getting the injection? And she's like, no, is it? And I was like, clearly it is. And there's even research studies on the hypertension. So anyway, go ahead.
Try that.
Lower.
He's got it right here.
Check. So, my eyeball's working good now. Wasn't working last week. So, couple of things. Just what Dr. Ward was saying, this spike protein is expressed on what's called the vascular endothelium. Those are the blood vessels. Your body then attacks the spike protein that's on the cells of the vascular endothelium, causing injury to your blood vessels. So somebody getting high blood pressure after these shots is not uncommon. You get myocarditis, you get pericarditis, which is inflammation of the heart. Millions of people get inflammation, but it's not to the level that it's picked up on routine tests. So even young people that aren't having heart attacks and strokes likely still have microscopic damage that is not getting picked up. That's number one. Number two is that a recent study in a lab has suggested, this is a preliminary study in a lab, means it's in vitro, means these are the kind of studies that these people should have been doing. It takes 10 years to get a vaccine. These are the kind of studies they should have been doing before this thing came out, okay? So the spike protein in this particular study enters the nucleus of the cell. It's not supposed to be in the nucleus of the cell. That's where your DNA is. That's where the DNA that replicates and has the genetic information that God gave you. The spike protein goes in there. We didn't know that. They said it didn't go in there. Well, guess what? It goes in there. And that spike protein can inhibit repair of DNA that breaks. It's called breakage. When your DNA unwinds and replicates, it comes back together, there can be pieces that break off. And the repair mechanisms are very complex. It's like a symphony in there. Nobody could make this. Nobody could design this but God. It's unbelievable. What goes on? You got to imagine. DNA is just wrapped up like a helix. It come back together. There's a little piece it doesn't quite bind right. Some other piece protein zips in and fixes it. Well, again, this is a preliminary study. It's looking at in vitro. It's not in humans. It's just in a lab. But the spike protein inhibits the repair of broken DNA in such a way that it may increase the risk of cancers. Because when your DNA breaks and doesn't get repaired correctly, that increases your risk of cancer. There's 1,000 things that were not looked at. And apparently, just today, the FDA wants us to wait 55 years before they release any of the study data from Pfizer. What is this, national security information? 55 years. Most people in here are dead. 55 years, there's a few young folks, but not that many. So why are they waiting 55 years? Obviously, they're covering something up. So then I saw what was it, USC or Cal State or somebody? They're supposed to play a college football game, and they had to cancel. And I guess they canceled it. I didn't triple check this, but I guess they canceled it because 40 players on one team were positive for COVID. They were all vaccinated. I'm not saying they were sick, but they were all positive. And I try to tell people over and over again, and they just don't seem to listen, that the shot doesn't stop you from getting infected. It doesn't stop you from transmitting the infection. So the whole ordeal about mandates and who's vaccinated, who's jabbed, and who's not, it's moot. I mean, if it actually worked, maybe they'd have a point, but it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Even Gates just said that like yesterday. He said, it just doesn't prevent transmission. So we're just going to have to give you an extra booster. What? An extra booster ain't going to fix the problem. So the final thing is, I want to encourage, Memorial has a nurses union. If you can do anything through your union. Otherwise, everyone, I think that our consensus was that everyone that's not going to take this, apply for an exemption. a religious exemption for the people that are here. And again, like Dr. Ward said, that's a stopgap measure that buys time. These snakes from the federal government, CMS, all this was written in September. Their whole 200+ page interim rule was written. They didn't want to put it out until the very last second, so no one would have time to come up with a plan. So they didn't. They put it out November the 4th, first shot December 4th, you're in or out January 4th. Bang, bang, bang. No time. So we encourage everyone to request an exemption. And if your exemption is not accepted, if a religious exemption is denied, everybody needs to let someone here know, either on the Facebook page or just come. Just let Angie know or Jill know. Let Angie and Jill know that you applied for religious exemption and were denied. We're going to put all of those together. Number one, it's really, as the attorney that was here a couple weeks ago, the hospitals think that you are asking them for a favor. Okay? You're asking them for a favor, but they have to grant you a favor. They don't understand that you're notifying them of your right. There's a big difference between a privilege and a right. My understanding is that this is a right under Title VII of EEOC. It's a protection, which means it's a right of an employee. So you're notifying them of your right to a religious exemption. Now, they are apparently going to deny a number of these exemptions. Everybody that gets denied needs to let us know. Just because they deny your religious exemption doesn't mean that it's going to be denied. Okay? Because the whole process, and I don't know who's listening, but if you're listening, the whole process will be scrutinized in a court of law. Okay? Pretty much every time these things are scrutinized, the process by which the determination is made is unacceptable. Because again, it's not a privilege. You're notifying them of a right. And it doesn't matter if you don't write something the exact way. What you should say, though, on this letter is that this is your sincerely held religious belief. And if you say that twice, it would be even better. Because that is the lingo that they want to see. Nurses, or educators, teachers in New York that were denied, they sued the state court, and they said, no, you didn't. You can go ahead and apply again. So we need to know who doesn't get accepted. Pretty much everybody that applies for religious exemption should get accepted. You just explain your sincerely held religious belief. The Holy Spirit has told you basically you cannot get this shot. That's it. I mean, if you got the flu shot before, it doesn't matter. The Holy Spirit didn't tell you not to get the flu shot. Did you get the DTaP, TDAP? Did you get MMR? Yeah. But that doesn't matter. Because I didn't have this feeling. I didn't have this sensation. I didn't have this clear, indication that this is not to be done. So you write that down. If they don't give it to you, it's not over. So I think everybody should file, and everybody needs to delay. You need to delay. That's what the exemption gives you. People are working on this. The Attorney General of Missouri is working on this. Our people are working on it. Dr. Akers met with Matt Huffman. I gave some information to Matt Huffman, the President of the Senate, and Bob Cupp on Monday. I got a call today from 2 attorneys that work for the Senate of the State Senate of Ohio. I talked to those attorneys for over half an hour about the process and approach legally by which CMS is breaking the law. And it's a constitutional issue, a separation of powers issue, where CMS is trying to force this without getting the required legislative action. In other words, there has to be a law passed by Congress to allow CMS to do this under an interim rule. They tried to bypass that. They can't do that. It's against the law. Now, like the other attorney said here, people are breaking the law all over the place these days. So, is it going to work? I don't know. But what I'm saying is, it takes time to file lawsuits, it takes time to get the motions, it takes time to get into court. Just don't give up. Just keep delaying. The OSHA one's dead. The OSHA one's dead. And the CMS one may be not too far behind, but we just have to keep delaying. Don't give up, just keep delaying.
So a couple things. On Monday, when there was some meetings in town for representatives, and I ran into Mike Swick. And him and I've known him a long time, and so I'll just tell you the exact conversation, pretty much verbatim. Because I was very encouraged. I called Jill as I left, because I was very encouraged about it. So
Mike Swick is who?
he's the CEO of Lima. So for the nurses here that are part of that healthcare system, I think I was encouraged by this. So he's sitting next to me, sat down, and we're listening to the representatives talk. And when we finished, I said, "Hey, how's it going?" And he's like, "I feel like a ping pong." He said, and then he looked at me and said, "How's it going?" Because he knows he's been involved in all this stuff, out protesting in front of his hospital. And I said, "Well," we're not very happy about what's happening. He said, "You understand that being pushed by CMS." And I do understand that. And I told him that. I said, I understand. I said, "You're getting squeezed by CMS." And of course, CMS is the federal government. And they're squeezing on the hospitals, saying, "You're going to do this." I'm editorializing now, but I'm telling you that CMS is squeezing on them about payment. And there's only so much that you can do to fight the federal government. Knowing that, and so I said to him, I realized that. I said, "But I'm not happy about what's happening on the other side." He's like, "Listen," he's like, "Trust me, we do not want to lose any staff." Now, this is a quote. Now, maybe he's lying to me. I don't think he was. "We don't want to lose any staff. Tell the people to follow the process. Follow the process. We want to grant these exemptions. But they've got to follow the process." Because what they're afraid of, and he told me this, is, of course, to get audited by CMS and basically to get hamstrung on it. So I said, "Okay." I said, "I will." And he said, "And also tell them, religious exemption, keep it religious." Okay? And I said, and I, of course, told him what my statement was in our conversation, which I've told you before, is I'm sealed by the Holy Spirit, and after a great amount of prayer, I'm compelled to not take any COVID shots. And that's my entire statement. All right? So, and he's like, and stop right there. Don't say anything else. That's it. Okay? And I would recommend that for the rest of us. And then he also told me this. He said, "And I also want to tell you there's no quotas. There's no limit. I do not want to lose any staff, but I cannot afford to have CMS come down on us." I said, "Okay, I will forward that." And I was very encouraged by that. Now, I have personally spoken to the attorney who was here. For disclosure, I actually hired him to represent my practice and my PA to help us make sure with the 3 hospitals that we go to make sure our paperwork is filled out correctly. So I've talked to him numerous times. I've had some of the nurses that have been around me talk to him on the phone to ask their questions when I'm between cases. And he said this to me just today. In most legal cases, more information is better, more thorough. And we know this is medicine, right? I mean, you document. You're a nurse or you're on the staff. You're going to document more thoroughly. Not the case for this. This is just the opposite for this. It's strictly religious exemption. What Rob says is exactly right. It doesn't have to be an Orthodox religion. And if you read the paperwork that he dropped off for us, it doesn't have to be Orthodox religion. It can be your own spiritual belief. Okay? But the fact is that don't get tangled up. Don't start off saying, I my religious belief is against it, and I'll tell you what, those damn things don't work anyway, right? And he's like, no, don't say that, right? Okay? I mean, you've just gone down the political trail. You've just gone down the medicine trail. Don't. Just keep it there, and what he said is exactly right. That is our constitutional rights as citizens of the United States. So, we have to push that through, buy time, and then hopefully judicially, legislatively, we'll get relief. But even if we don't, I mean, ultimately we have to have relief because otherwise we really don't have a constitution because that is foundational. Okay, so I just want to relay that to you. My conversation with Mike Swick for those people who are in LMH, and as well as the advice for the attorney. Any questions?
So before we'll do that, you can ask questions. The memorial people particularly have leading questions that request that you add medical information. How would one fill out the form to satisfy CMS about the medical information and it says every question must be answered, yet avoid and have a very clean statement? Dr. Avery.
Tell you what, keep talking about it for 2 seconds and I'll pull out what
Let's
he
do a
actually said.
question. Let's do a question.
I was going to say that's kind of what my question was. The Lima Memorial packet has in it 7 questions you have to answer, and it makes it sound in that packet if you don't answer those 7 questions that your exemption is going to be denied.
So they put you in a paradox.
Yeah, but
Right.
and it wants to know like if you've taken the flu vaccine, why did you take the flu vaccine but you won't take the COVID? Is there any other medical say something about, is there any other medical procedure or something that you wouldn't take because of this sincerely held religious belief?
That's where it's illegal. And also the top part of that memorial piece, it says something about not harming anyone else. It's irrelevant to the question. It's not part of the thing. So the memorial questionnaire is extremely troubling. Dr. Akers may have answers to help. I looked at it. I'm thinking I'm just going to say, see my religious exemption. But I don't know yet. I'm going to answer every question.
They'll send it back.
If they send it back, I'll send it back. I'm not asking. This is a right. And I'm notifying them that I'm exercising my right.
Do you have that question? So, my name is Chris Ewing. I'm the senior pastor at County Line Church of Brother, and I've helped dozens of people with their exemptions, and I've actually helped specific memorial people. A lot of how you answer these 7 questions really depends on your sincerely held belief, because some of them, if it's for example what they have said, hey, the Holy Spirit told me no, don't take it, then you can say, see my exemption letter for 1, 2, 3, and for number 4 and 5, it doesn't matter. You can just answer it plain as day, because it's, please, number 4 is, please describe whether you, as an adult, you've received any vaccines, so on and so forth. Either not applicable or yes, no, whatever the truth is, because it does not speak to your sincerely held belief. Now, if your sincerely held belief is the fetal tissue, then you have to kind of take that into consideration. So those questions, I wouldn't worry about them because they may or may not speak to your sincerely held belief. So just make sure that you're answering them honestly so that you don't get in trouble for being dishonest and then you're fired because you were insubordinate for some other reason.
But if yeses and nos are good,
Right.
it's answered, but it's a 2 or 3 letter word. That's it. Like Dr. Short. Don't go into a long soliloquy about blah, 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 blah. Did you do this? Yes. Next question.
So the attorney filled mine out. And so he emailed it to me today. For question 1, please see attached. Question 2, yes, please see attached. Question 3, which is, how long have you held a religious belief? This question need only be, this is his answer. This question need only be asked if an employer has an objective basis for questioning nature or sincerity of my belief. That's what he typed in there. For the next question, 4, see my answer to question number 3 above. See my answer to question number 3 above. See my answer to 3 above, and no. And I'm just saying, so that's the lawyer going about it. I agree with your point. I would not personally go down the path of stem cells. I mean, the aborted tissue, because I'm afraid that they will find some pagan doctor in Denmark who published a paper 2 years ago in some remote journal that says, well, you know, we've sterilized those and they're not really from it, and play some kind of game. You see what I mean?
That has been approved at Lima Memorial.
Okay, yeah, I'm just concerned about if you...
And at nursing homes, and at, I'm not telling you to,
Yeah.
but if that is, then you gotta...
No, I think that's a great, I mean, that's true. I worry that when you get out there, then it opens up to every pagan researcher across the world being able to publish a paper and them saying, well, here it is. We just undermined your argument.
If you go that route, do not print one off the internet and submit it. Write it yourself.
Yeah, right, okay. So,
Anybody got questions, comments, concerns, anything?
Can you put that on the Facebook page? What you set up?
Yeah.
I am not capable of putting anything on a Facebook page, but I can forward it to people who can.
We have,
I will put it on the Facebook page after he forwards it to me.
and are we using the website, limamedicalfreedom.com? That, it'll probably be there, right? Angie, we can put it on there.
Where are you at? I'm looking right there.
I mean, we can put it on the webpage, right?
You put it on the webpage as well.
Yeah.
I have to give it to Aaron.
Yeah.
Hi, I had just noticed today that Lima Memorials is listed out as it's only valid for the calendar year in which it is written. So I had asked my manager, does this mean that we start this process over leading into January? He said at this point, it is a very fluid situation. We do not know. I know as much as you do, but I said I was just reading back through. So I didn't know if anybody else had heard anything else along those lines.
I think that the attorney brought that up, if you guys remember, I don't know how many of you guys were here, but he said it is very possible that they can hand these back to you at any time, and that you need to write on there, very simple, my religious objection is still the same as it was when I originally filled out this paper, essentially is what it says. It is in this handout, and for anybody who wasn't here, there are copies of this handout out there about filling out your religious exemption. But that's one thing he said is, my religious exemption or my sincerely held belief has not changed, and my exemption remains until I revoke it.
Okay. In writing?
Yes. In writing.
Yes, very good, thank you.
The actual wording that he used on the paperwork, and I just received the final copy of it today. I printed it off when I got home around 5 o'clock. I signed it. My staff's going to scan it on the computer, and we're going to send it back to him. He's going to send it certified to them, as well as we're going to deliver one in hand tomorrow. But the actual wording is, this notice of religious exemption from vaccination shall not expire, but shall remain in effect unless or until withdrawn in writing by my client. So that was the actual wording.
Nancy, in the handout, clear back here, that is actually what this paragraph refers back to. That's like the second to the last page.
The notice to the employer, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is loud enough. One thing that, touching on like what Dr. Akers was saying, I really feel like the leaders at the hospitals and the healthcare system, I mean, they're in this with us. That's the feeling that I've gotten, that CMS has basically thrown this at them. There is no official quota, like the amount of exemptions. So basically, there is no test out. You can't opt to get tests every week. It's either you get the vaccination or you have to submit an exemption. And there's no quota. Like if it's 40% of your staff that apply for exemption, I mean, they haven't capped that out or anything. And my understanding from leadership, at least where I'm at, is that they are going to try to do everything that they can to get these exemptions passed and to work with people. Because, you know, they're in a tailspin just like all of us are. And I think, you know, all of us are pretty exhausted, and that's kind of what this group is for, is to feel free to ask questions about this. So I know that earlier this week when this came out, and a lot of people were really nervous, and you know, we all work with all different age groups of people, especially some of the younger workers that I was working with became very panicked, and were wondering, well, if I have to get a jab, which one should I get? What would you do? So we just want to let people know that we still have time, and there's many people in the group here that are working with our government leadership to try to, you know, go at it from an angle of basically this is unconstitutional and illegal. So don't panic, work on the exemptions. There's lots of resources for you. Pastor Chris is here tonight, you can speak with him, and you know, any of us from the group, there's all kinds of resources. We've got the paper here. So again, don't panic. We still have time, and that's really one of the big messages that we wanted to give.
The attorney that was here, his email address is on here. If you run into a question that you just can't figure out and you can't find anybody that can help you with it, he says, please email him the question. He will respond to you.
Well, and if you think about our community, I mean, we're all in this together, and if we have exemptions that are denied, and even if 5 to 10% of the healthcare population is cut, I mean, that's going to be traumatic to our community, and our leaders recognize this, and they're hearing our voices. They are recognizing what's going on. They're listening and watching closely. So don't think that you know, they're not going through their own problems right now. They really want to keep everyone.
On the other hand, if either St. Rita's or Memorial wants to test the constitutionality of this supposed interim rule, I'd be happy to talk to them and plug them in with the attorneys at the Senator's office in the state of Ohio that would provide them the ability to reject this overreach and pretty much put it away. So that would be the other option. It's actually interesting because CMS will never defund St. Rita's Medical Center. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. It's not possible. Everybody knows this. It's not possible. They have a residency training program. They have hundreds of patients. They have thousands of employees. Medicare has agreements with people all over the counties to provide them care under Medicare. They're going to be breaching their contract. It's never going to happen. So it's sort of a veiled threat by a huge, powerful entity. But in the reality, they would never be able to close down St. Rita's or Memorial. It's just not possible. Now, could they pick on a small hospital like Van Wert or Coldwater or something? Yeah. But big trauma, level 2 trauma centers that get referrals from all over from 12 counties, it's just not possible. They're not going to close OSU Medical Center. You know, OSU Medical Center should probably bring the suit, right? Because what are they going to do? They can't, there's nothing that you can do against these big, huge hospitals, you know, Riverside. They're not going to take away Medicare from Riverside Hospital in Columbus. So the whole thing, if you actually start to think about how that would work, it wouldn't work because all the Medicare recipients in Ohio would just be wringing the necks of the legislators who would then say, hey, we didn't pass a law that said CMS could do this, and then it would all stop. So, yeah.
I've got another question. So I was just curious how your lawyer filled out Lima Memorial's section where it's please initial next to each of the statements below. So those 4 statements, especially the second and fourth one. So should I contract COVID-19, I will immediately report it to Associate Health and comply with all procedures as specified by employee health staff. And those procedures are not clearly defined at this point. And then I understand and agree to comply with and abide by all Lima Memorial Health System COVID-19 policies and procedures for non-vaccinated employees. And again, it is, I don't know, it's not terribly clearly defined, and how it was relayed to me was we're following CMS's rules, we're following CDC's rules, so again, it could be evolving. And so it makes me nervous to initial it or to sign. So did your lawyer recommend you initial and sign?
So he did check those off, and I signed it. What he did put in which I guess they'll post the actual documents, but in it was like 7 pages total. But one of the pages before this, he said, although my client is requesting a reasonable accommodation, it is my understanding that since the outbreak of COVID-19 in March of 2020, you have already been reasonably accommodating my client and other employees in the form of measures intended to slow or to halt the spread of COVID-19. Said measures were chosen by you and as such presumed not to have created an undue hardship and still acceptable to my client. Meaning everything they put in place, I'm fine with that, okay? Therefore, my client's expectation going forward is that there will be no deviation from these measures that would be more restrictive, absent solid justification. And my client would consider any alternative proposed reasonable accommodation that was mutually agreed upon, and certainly if it were less restrictive. Sam and I talked about that today, and I said, okay, explain. And he's like, listen, we've already been in this whole thing with, we're going to use masks, we're not going to use masks, we're going to socially distance, we're going to wash our hands, we're going to pray to, the idol of Baal and Moloch. The thing is that he's basically stating to them that, that's fine, but I don't intend upon, and I don't like having some unreasonable thing done to me. I have to go to the hospital at 4 o'clock in the morning and have a rapid tested every day. I'm not doing that. You see what I mean? That's unreasonable. You didn't need it before, you don't need it now, okay? And especially in light of the fact, that we know, if you look around the world, as well as our own country, the vaccinated are the ones that are really getting the infections now. How is it that we have more infections now, despite the fact the majority of our population is vaccinated, right? Countries with the most vaccination rates across the world have the highest numbers right now of cases and deaths, more than last year. Does that make any sense to you for an effective shot? It's not. So anyway, but not to get off track, that's how he answered. So he said, again, as much as we can, we're going to play nice. We're not going to just tear the sheet up and say, we're not going to fill it out, but we're going to fill it out so that it doesn't, catch us in a trap. So.
I have a question. Okay, the lawyer was saying about mailing in the exemptions. Ours is online. Should we also print everything off and mail it in or hand it in to the hospital?
I personally am gonna print it all off and I'm gonna mail it to, corporate, where we're supposed to send things. I'm gonna give it to my boss. I'm gonna send one to HR, and then I'm gonna keep a copy for myself. I'm gonna do exactly what he said. I'm gonna print emails off, everything that they've given us or sent us. I'm gonna make my paper trail, just like he told us to do. And I'm gonna make copies of my exemptions and these forms that I'm using, and I'm sending certified mail, just like he said.
I think you should, if it's asked to be done online, I think you should do it, okay? And you should document, as best you can, whatever receipt number they have, then you should also deliver it in hand. Okay? I mean, because, we all know that there are times when you send a text or an email, it's like, I know I sent it, and then somebody didn't get it. Well, we don't want that inconvenience to happen to you in this case, right? So.
I am doing mine online as well, but I'm just sending copies as well.
I think that's good, and then if anybody doesn't have this piece that the lawyer had, you send this with your statement, and it says, the information contained in this letter shall supersede any and all conflicting information that may have been submitted by other means, including, but not limited to, online or electronic forms. The online form is restrictive and does not permit me to fully and accurately notify you of the basis of my exemption. So what's on the online form is superseded by this piece of paper. It's just a thought.
I just wanted to go back to the question number 4 on Memorial's question area at the bottom. I actually just was speaking with someone before I came here regarding that, because I'm not comfortable signing this piece of it because your policies have already changed. So the policy I have right here in front of me is November 9th, but I understand that there's a updated policy as of November 12th, and I don't have that policy. So, I'm gonna reread that tonight and make sure I know before I sign that, because that was highly encouraged, obviously. But then what I did was I said, is it okay if I just put, I'm okay, or this is regarding signing the policies and procedures that have been updated as of, or agree with the policies and procedures as of the November 12th. Because you didn't notify me that there was a new policy, you didn't send that one to me. So how would I know I'm signing the one as of November 9th? So then that way it's very clear that I'm okay with the policy as of November 12th. I'm educated on that. But any policy thereafter, you need my signature again to come back to say that it's been updated since that point. And they were fine with that. They let me write it right on there.
I'm glad I work at St. Rita's. I'm confused. Other questions? So what Dr. Akers is saying, do you have a question? What Dr. Akers is saying, I appreciate what you guys are saying about the attorney stuff. That attorney is available for anybody, correct? Yeah.
I work at Memorial as well. I don't know how many people here are from St. Rita's. I used to work there many years ago, but I went on ahead and I did my online version and sent it into Memorial on Monday afternoon. I'm just curious, when do I send the one that I want to send certified, which is the one with the one from the lawyer attached to it? Well, I figured it'd have to be tomorrow, but I held off.
Their deadline is Sunday, I believe.
Right.
So, immediately tomorrow.
Yeah. Do I also, I actually rewrote out those questions and I answered those on a separate piece of paper. Do I send them as well, or do I just leave all their stuff out of it and it's just my attestation?
I'm sorry, I missed that part.
Would it just be my attestation, or would it just be those questions as well that they asked us? Like their paper?
I would do everything.
Send all of it?
I would. Yep.
Okay. Just curious, because I wasn't really quite agreeable to being tested once a week, but I don't know. Okay.
So again, with the weekly testing, it's something that I requested. I don't want to be a needle swab. So because of the conflicts and things like that. So they've accommodated to me being able to do the saliva testing. So I think that's something that we talked about a little bit last week too with the attorney, is that we're gonna fight for what we can first. So let's keep. You go. But I think our first thing is to keep our jobs, right? And then we can go back in once we have that to be able to say, okay, now we didn't require this before, why are we requiring it now? And so I was like, I'm gonna go ahead and say, I'm okay with the weekly testing, but you're not gonna get up my nose. I don't want it in my nose. So I will accommodate you by accommodating me to allow me to do this live testing. And they're like, absolutely. When we get there, we can.
I totally agree that, again, the priority is to establish that there's an exemption. If you remember right, when we first, way back when we didn't know really what COVID was gonna be, I mean, we were all getting swabbed once a week, those kind of things, and, we were okay with it. Now, we know it's ridiculous, but, and I'm not sure if this is a CMS thing or this is just a memorial thing. So in that case, I think you establish a religious exemption and then you move on after that. I mean, I have data, because I helped out one of my patients who I did some nasal reconstruction on. She's down in South Carolina, college student, getting tortured. I mean, they're beating up her nasal septum, because she won't get the shots. Because basically, they're just torturing her. So I wrote her an exemption, as well as sent in literature stating that there's sputum tests out there that are better than any kind of nasopharyngeal swabs or even oral pharynx. So they actually went on. They said, okay, sure, we appreciate the information and we'll stop doing it. So I think that again, establish it, and then after that, we work from inside the system to say, this is ridiculous. I mean, here's the data. Why are we not doing this? Yeah, I mean, I think, and again, it's one battle at a time, right? Right. Yeah, it's one battle at a time. You know what I mean? And again, I mean, there's lots of ways to argue that. I mean, you can argue that from the perspective. Say it again. Say that. Well, listen, you're talking to a guy who's a mule. I mean, I'm mad about the whole thing, but but you gotta pick and choose and say, okay, we'll win the first battle, we'll win the next one. Yeah, as opposed to throwing the whole thing and burning the whole building down. So.
Right, your goal is to keep your job right now, get your exemption, and then deal with the rest. To speak to your asking about sending everything, and yes, he's right. There's an aspect of sending everything, but if you're expanding on those questions, I want you to know to be very careful of how you expand, because that's very easy to go beyond your sincerely held belief. So to be in compliance with the ruling, they ask you to submit it online. Now, a lawyer might actually tell you to send everything in, but actually how the Civil Rights Act, Title 7 and the EEOC, how they define it is you just need to notify them. You've already established and did what they asked you to do by answering everything online. Really, the only thing you absolutely need to send hard copy is your sincerely held belief. Sure, if you feel comfortable sending those things to make sure, hey, you have all your I's dotted, T's crossed, but be very careful of expanding your own, because you don't want to expand past your sincerely held belief. Yeah. So I'd be cautious.
Yeah, I wasn't meaning to expand anything. I mean, I keep it the bare minimum. What I was trying to get at was that it's just convenient somehow where paperwork that's emailed, we didn't get it. You missed the deadline. It's like, no. I not only emailed it, I gave you a copy.
I just ran into people that have written
No.
and it's like, whoa.
No. I get it. Your statement should be not much longer than mine, in my personal opinion, which is pretty brief. Because again, you leave yourself less exposed. So.
As a gastroenterologist, if they go with the rectal swab, there may be an outbreak of fecal incontinence. I'm seeing a lot of fecal incontinence going on with this rectal swab, if you know what I mean.
Rob, do you have your office number that we can get a hold of?
I have the copy of the new policy for Memorial, and it lists failure to comply with protective measures such as masks, and they include face shields, which, from what I understand, we haven't used for quite a while. So I don't know if anyone caught that for Memorial. And also, it says for those with approved exemptions or temporary stay, not limited to requirements, not limited to regular testing, masking, social distancing, health checks. And then it says restrictions on travel or activities and changes in duties or work assignment.
Right.
I don't know if everybody saw that or.
Well, like Dr. Aker said, we're just going to bite off the piece of the exemption, right? And then, if they grant the exemptions, like they say they're going to, I don't know that I can hold my breath that long, but if they do, then we're gonna have to address these, quote, safety measures with data and see what we can do. Because we can't fight that whole thing in the time frame that they're given, right? So face masks, I mean, those shields and all that, you can do that, but I'm saying that there's gonna be more discussions that are gonna evolve around, well, now we have these exemptions. There's no CMS rule that says exactly what any entity needs to do. These are gonna be entity to entity. At our endoscopy center, we're developing what we're gonna do, and it's not gonna be all that, okay? So every entity is gonna decide if you come across a place like Dr. Akers' patient and they wanna make it retribution, for whatever reason, okay, that's up to the entity. But we're gonna have to get the exemption piece bridge crossed, don't you think? And then we'd have to address all of those things afterwards, because we can't address it beforehand.
I have my copy that I sent to them on Monday, if anybody from Memorial wants to look at all the pages that I sent. And I also posted something to the Facebook group today about AMA now going to go after physicians that do not toe the line for promoting the vaccine. There was also somebody on nurses, a nurse that evidently posted it. I'm a pharmacist. I haven't seen the state board come across with anything yet. So I was just wondering, well, I assume we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but
the AMA is,
the AMA is not to be trusted. They are a Marxist organization, okay? The AMA came out 2.5 months ago and recommended that for their physicians that they should not put the sex of the baby on the birth certificate. That's true. You've lost all credibility in my mind, scientifically, okay? I mean, so they are a Marxist organization. So OSMA is quickly following the same path. I mean, you know, I don't know what to say about the persecution. I mean, I've avoided it narrowly here a couple times. I mean, the OSMA, there was a doctor who wanted to have Dr. Weary, Dr. Hafey, and myself censored, I should say, you know, politically by the OSMA because of our articles we wrote last year regarding the effectiveness of hydroxychloroquine. And, you know, fortunately there was people on that committee that blocked that from happening. But, you know, we're going to be persecuted. We know that. It says that in a good book. But we can't live by lies. So, I mean, you know, I would love to have those kind of discussions, open debates, but the problem is that we won't, about the real science, not the science, the real science about what we need to do, what we don't need to do. So, but, you know, we'll have to deal with that. The nursing boards are going to have to deal with that stuff. And again, I mean, when you give your opinions, you can have any opinion you want. When you're talking factually, I don't think you need to have the narrative of the party line. I think you're allowed to say, listen, here's the reality, okay? And I'll tell you the reality of what I think about the shots. I think that the shots have some benefit, all right, as a therapeutic, transiently, okay? I do think they have some benefit, especially people who are immune compromised, people who are elderly, who are high risk in positions. But they also come with a high risk of other difficulties. Now, you know, the science behind it is this. We know the nucleotide, which is, you know, the circle part of the virus, all right? They have separated that in labs now from the spike protein. The circle part, the nucleotide has no effect on the vascular tree, on the vascular parasites. The spike protein is a toxin to the vascular tree. You understand what I mean? It attacks the vascular tree. It causes clotting. It causes inflammation. All these things you're hearing about. It doesn't always seem to do it, and we don't understand that. But it does do it. Well, what does the shots make you make? The spike protein. Okay? So that's the toxin. I mean, you know, you cannot deny that the VAERS system, which is underreported. I mean, there's a study came out several years ago that said that the VAERS report only gets 1% of all vaccine-related events. Just because it takes a practitioner at least 30 minutes to sit down and do it. That's not something they get remuneration from. That's just something they have to do on their own time, which is hard to get people to do that. It's like, oh, geez, do I really have to do this? But on that system, we're talking about over 18,000 deaths from the COVID shots. That's a lot. That's a lot more than any other vaccine ever. So anyway, again, back to your question or your point. We may be persecuted, but that's why you just have to make sure that what you do say is factual.
Right. And there's not a whole lot of doctors up here. So, that's just how it is. Everything that we say and the nurses say is backed by data. They can say you can't spread misinformation, right? Like you can't call fire in here and people panic and all this. But the things that Dr. Akers just said about the spike protein being the toxin, being toxic, it's a fact. It's a scientific fact. He could produce, 10 articles in 30 minutes that show it's a fact. So there's really nothing, if you're out just lying about stuff, well, doctors shouldn't be out lying about stuff. And we're not lying. We're telling the truth. Now, Bible says when, truth lies are told and the truth's a radical idea, or sort of you get persecuted if you try to tell the truth. So, could well happen, but I'm not personally concerned because I'm not providing any disinformation or misinformation. I'm providing factual, data-based, scientific information.
And I'll say one more thing too about this. I mean, this is something that could have dreamt, and I could have never got you to imagine it 3 years ago if I'd have told you this. But I'll say a statement that has become really real to me, and that is, the truth does not need to be censored. Okay? It does not need to be black-holed or deplatformed so think about that. I mean, if it is the Ohio State Medical Board, I would love to sit down and on broad daylight have those conversations. Show me what I said and show me what I said was wrong. Okay? I mean, but again, it probably won't work that way. There'll be some backdoor committee thing and I'll receive a letter and here's your, that's how it works. But I'm saying, just think about this. The truth does not need to be censored. Okay?
Anybody else?
So interestingly, there's two people I think would encourage you to look up. So there was a Dr. Semmelweis, all right? And, S-E-M-M-E-L, and this W, because it's German, and E-I-S, all right? And look up his life, all right? Because he's the one that actually discovered that all these women were dying from childbirth. And he's the one that suggested through his own, observation that maybe if we washed our hands between patients, we wouldn't have this problem. The mortality rate went down significantly, and he was an outcast in the medical society. He changed surgical technique, he changed OB technique, and he actually ended up dying in an insane asylum. Okay? And then look up Alexander Fleming. We all know him from penicillin. A total heretic according to to his fellow of his day. The medical community of his day, a heretic. Not accepted at all. Even though, obviously, one of the, as far as greatest discoveries, got to be top 10 in the world. So anyway, just saying that this is not unusual where the truth is, really, shall we say, resisted.
I have a question for all of you just to make sure that, does anybody have a difficult time figuring out what their sincerely held belief is? Does everybody have that all down? Like what your sincerely held belief is and knowing how to write an exemption letter?
So you give some guidance.
Okay.
What do you think?
Well, by the law, a sincerely held belief is defined by moral or ethical. So how I encourage people to do this is simply ask the question of why are you against the vaccine? Then how does that equate into a moral or ethical issue within your life? If you can do that, then you can stand on it if you become questioned. And not all places of employment are questioning, but people, especially like Ohio Health, of course, it went crazy in their questioning. Then you can stand and get questioned and stand and not get sidelined or sidetracked with all these others because it's your sincerely held belief. So if you can do that, then how you write a letter is simply, you start it out as a formal letter, all those, who's sending it, the date, who you're sending it to, you address it them. You start the letter out exactly right off the bat with what you're asking for, exemption from this policy. You write in the body of it your sincerely held belief. You end it with any accommodations, if any, that you're requesting. Because for some of you, there's not going to be any accommodations because you're going to do the same thing you've been doing before COVID, when we're with COVID, right? So, and then you sign it. But it's just helpful. I've ran into a lot of people that have said why they're against the vaccine, but it does not equate into a moral or ethical dilemma within their life. So if you ask that question, then connect it with the ethical or moral issues that you have with that. It only needs to make sense to you, then you can stand on it if you truly believe that. So, yeah, so let me give you some examples that I have ran into, and not all of them I agree with. So the very first ones, of course, everybody wants to use the fetal tissue, which you can absolutely use. I've seen it be approved in nursing homes. St. Rita's, actually, I just found out, approved one similar along the lines just recently. So there's that one. There's the pure body, which from the Holy Spirit standpoint, God created your immune system. That is somebody, I've known a couple people that have said that, and so they are very health related. They actually watch what they eat, their exercise, the drugs that they actually take, and so that is their ethical, because it's actually a moral issue. If they allow something that they think is harmful for the body, then that creates a moral issue within their own lifestyle. There's also then the changing of God's design. There's also the last two that I've helped with was simply God told me not to, very similar to you. I have prayed, God said not to, so that will create then an ethical issue within my life. If I honor and follow God in everything, if I go against him, then I am sinning, therefore it's bad. Some of those arguments you can actually use, like the pure body, you can use that even if you're an atheist. There's crazy health nuts all the way around that really, and I meant not in a good way. So I even know somebody that truly believes that it is the mark of the beast, and they have used that argument. And you will not win with them because they truly believe. So I've worked with some people with the military, and that's even harder than these health systems. So they're going to deny all of them straight off the bat, and they've already said it. So, but they're still going through the motions of the exemptions. So there's a lot of different ways, but if you ask that question of why am I against it, how does that stop, like why then is that an ethical issue or moral dilemma within my life, you will have your sincerely held belief. So if you're sitting here just saying, hey, I'm going to pick up what they are, don't do that. Because if you get questioned, you're not going to be able to stand ground. Figure it out for yourself and go from there.
Anybody else have any questions or just need to make a comment? Or just yell? Do you have a question? Yep.
So there are a couple of circumstances of people that we know where their religious exemptions have been denied. Most of these are younger students, and they're in college nursing school. And we're wondering if they should resubmit their exemptions if it was a while ago. And then another one is just, we had some that were side by side, identical, fill out the paperwork exactly the same. And it was to the Meadows, actually same facility, and one was denied and one was approved. And how do you handle those sort of, they know it, I mean, we have copies of them, you know, we all went over them together. I don't, yeah, what do you tell these, and then, again, my question
So
is
are
about
these,
the students.
are these employees or students?
Well, they're both employees.
They're
They're both employees. One was an STNA, she's in nursing school, and one is a physical therapy assistant.
I couldn't hear that, but if they're both employees and they wrote the exact same thing, and they're both employees, then if
But
one
that
got,
might be the issue. You wrote the exact same thing. Was the first one that submitted approved and the second one wasn't? Because if you're filing the same thing, then is that truly your sincerely held
Okay, I see
belief?
what you're saying.
That's what you get in with the fetal cell. That's what they were saying. Because so many people ran to that one first. You know, and I still encourage use that if your sincerely held belief is that, because nobody's going to rock you off that.
Yeah.
You know? So there's basically 4 things that they can do. Okay? Nothing, which is what they're doing now, right? You can take the jab if it's for employment. You can appeal, and if you appeal, what I would do is I would actually, a lawyer actually told me this, is that you actually ask for the criteria of why it was denied the first time. So if you ask them, they don't necessarily need to tell you, but you know that gives you if they tell you, then that helps you to file an appeal and then write directly to that. The 4th thing is to hire an attorney. Now I've actually only suggested one person hire an attorney, and that was due because of their timeline. This person contacted me. It was a mother of a student, very similar to what the lawyer's situation was in clinicals, and they needed to have clinicals within 3 days, whatever. And so I'm like, listen, you can appeal, but they're going to hold off. You're going to miss your deadline. You need to have an attorney help you with that. So.
And so then just one more that we just, Rhodes just came out with whatever their letter, and their students, Rhodes is saying it's not them, it's the places where the nurses or the nursing students are having their clinicals at.
Right.
And so depending on where they are doing their clinical, the exemption, the religious exemption goes directly to the place that they are doing their clinical at. And the school is saying they have nothing to do with that, it's each individual place that the students do in their clinical.
If that's the case, you need to have your students question that, because they need to know the policy of that place so that they can then apply for that exemption. So they need to know the criteria, they need to know the ins and outs of who do they submit it to, are they submitting it to the school? Because if you're submitting it to the school, then it's the school that is responsible. I have not, that's the first time I've heard the school saying, usually the places come back and say, if you want an exemption, it has to go through the school.
Yeah, I have a copy of I have exactly what was sent to them from Rhodes, it's just
Right,
yesterday.
it's probably because Rhodes doesn't have a policy right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard the opposite too, where it's the school that is, you have to get the exemption from the school. So
Because it'd be interesting to find out if they actually call those places, if they actually kick them back to the school.
Yeah. Are there any other exemption questions? Okay, yeah.
Sorry, mine's not an exemption question, but okay. Sorry, another memorial employee, but we had a couple girls from radiology who's already sent some stuff in, and HR told them that they're not HR themselves is not accepting anything. So they sent it to did the Associate Health. They said, well, we're not taking these per se, we're giving them to Jamie Quillhorst. So I talked to Jamie Quillhorst, and she said, well, I'm just collecting, but I'm sending it on to another, I don't know if it's an outside entity. Do you guys know, is there who's actually going to look at these and say yes or no? Is there, I've heard of a local Lima doctor that might be one of these people that does this that is very anti-us. More like, oh, you better get the shot, like almost like we're idiots. So have you guys heard of any, who's gonna be checking this?
I believe it is a third party that they're sending them to.
This is at Memorial?
Yeah. I just found that out.
There's a committee at St. Rita's.
Yeah, there was supposed to be a committee, but then that from Jamie's conversation.
From what I know from St. Rita's, talking to Owens, I mean, there's a committee. Yeah. I mean, there's a committee with multiple people from HR, there's a physician. Let me just say, you probably can't worry about that. Just stick to these things that we're talking about, and we can only do what we can do. You submit it and follow the process so we can get through it. Ma'am, did you have another question?
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
that no hand delivery.
Yeah. Any other exemption concerns, questions? A lot of concerns. So one of the last things maybe tonight that we want to talk about is where do we go from here? Because everybody's working on the exemptions right now, and that's great. That's what we need to do. That's the moment. So you're going to turn in your exemption. Then what's next? And I think this is not over. Once you turn your exemption in, this is just not over. It's still continuing. So we talk about maybe addressing some of these concessions that they're saying, whether it's masks, whether it's testing, the next thing. I don't know. But for sure, we know that the Ohio legislation is a huge thing. And so Jill is going to, she was just on the phone with Jennifer Gross, the representative that brought House Bill 448 to the floor. And so she's going to speak on what's going on in the House right now. And I guess it passed, but anyway, she'll give some information on that.
Well, I hope I don't butcher this because it just all kind of came together today. Actually, when they got there, they didn't realize that this was going to even hit the floor. It was actually a bill for alcohol in bars, and they used this as a vehicle to put all this information on it. And it's Senate Bill or Sub Bill 218. Al Catrona is the person who submitted it originally. I know we're talking about House Bill 248, we're all signing signatures. We're going to continue to do that because that is a good bill. And we want to get that on the ballot so that people can vote for the bill and take it out of the legislators' hands. But I just encourage you to get familiar with this stuff and understand it and know what you can say to the representatives. So just a summary of this bill, the bill's provisions is it prohibits schools and employers from requiring a non-FDA approved vaccine. That's good for our schools. If a school or employer mandates an approved vaccine, it details exemptions that must be provided via written statement. These exemptions are medical contraindications, natural immunity, and reasons of personal conscience, including religious convictions. Now that's for the schools. Exemptions do not apply to Children's Hospital, ICU, or CCU students, employees, but requires good faith, reasonable accommodations to be made. In the event of a violation, student or employees can seek relief via mandamus, action, or discrimination claim. I don't know what that is. State an injury brought about by an employer. Mandated vaccine is a workers' comp injury. Prohibits this claim if the person is receiving other compensation spelled out in the bill. So that's a good thing that it would be a workers' comp claim, because right now they're claiming, I had a young lady who stood up, she said, I'm 22 years old, and I just graduated nursing school, I need my job. But what happens if, I've read that it causes heart problems. What happens if I have a heart problem? And they basically said, well, that's on you, because you decided to take the vaccine. So that's heartbreaking, to know that, that's your choice. Provisions, the next one is provisions related to student and employee medical requirements, sunset on September 30th, 2025. So basically this bill would end in 2025. And again, why we need to keep working on House Bill 248. It prohibits vaccine passports for public or private entities. This is a win. Because right now, New York has passports, California has passports. I just had a friend who went to a restaurant there, a Denny's restaurant, and the woman asked for his passport, and he laughed at her. He's like, what are you talking about? And he said, she said, like, by a certain date that everyone will be required to have a passport, or they can eat out on the patio or in the tent. The next one, it permits an award of an attorney's fees to prevailing party in action to enforce this. permits EMTs with the proper training to administer COVID tests. Well, that sounds really important. Extends civil immunities found in House Bill 606 through June 30th, 2023 to businesses and certain healthcare providers regarding exposure or transmission on their premises. So just speaking with Jennifer, she said it was a really long, hard day, and a lot of people that are really for House Bill 248 are really upset that and this actually did pass the Senate, or pass the House floor, and it's going on to the Senate. So it has to be passed to the Senate, and then DeWine gets to try to veto it. And it's been said that he will likely veto it. So again, this is where we can call in to the representatives, call into DeWine. Actually, email is better because those stay public record. They can.
I did already, but he didn't do anything.
Well, I understand that, but I think it's.
Emailed me back, but it was something totally different. The heartbeat, I was all worried about vaccine mandates. We're doing for the heartbeat, nothing about anything.
Yeah, again, I would still encourage you, even the other representatives, to do that. So she said, yeah, it's not a great bill. She said it's not inaccurate, it's more like a pinto. So, in that retrospect, we have to work on something better. What did she say? It is better than the House Bill 435, which was on the table before. So with that, that's the information that I have right now. But I would really encourage you to get up to date on that and to also email your representatives.
That's 218, right, Bill?
218.
Where are we at with all the signatures? We're supposed to need 130,000 by May. Am I correct about that?
I think she needed 1,300 to present it to Yoast, and then at that point, Yoast will decide whether we can move on to get the 130,000. And I have not talked to Diane this week.
We have to be close. I mean,
Donna, you've kind of probably been keeping up.
Diane thinks once we get everything to her this weekend that she's got more than enough. What we were shooting for was a couple thousand signatures because we know some's going to get thrown out. But she thinks she's got, once we offer all the paperwork, she's going to have enough to at least get through the first step. And then we'll go to step 2, which is going to require more signatures. And I don't know the exact number on that.
well, I just want to thank you. Donna's really worked really hard on this, and I know several other people have taken some to get signatures, so we really appreciate that. That's what we need. We need everybody to join us and help with this.
Is there any other questions on this stuff? Okay.
So this is maybe a little bit off, but the company that I work for, we actually are falling under the federal contractor mandate. And we're being told that the federal mandate supersedes any state law. Is that possible? They're saying even if you live in a state that has outlawed vaccine mandates, said they can't happen, they're saying we don't care.
That's the thing, though. It's not a law, but I think that's where we also have to work on the attorney goes to present this as a lawsuit. The CMS needs to be sued by the state of Ohio. So again, emailing the attorney goes.
Anybody else have any other questions? Do want to give you a couple updates that we have coming up. The December 15th, Jim Jordan and Jennifer Grove talked to us tonight, actually. They are coming to UNOH Event Center. We originally were going to do a dinner, but we want to be able to have as many of you guys there as possible. And so, therefore, we have totally scratched the dinner, and we're going to make it a free event. It will still be a ticketed event, so you will have to get a ticket. I'm still in the process of getting the tickets on and an online type thing, so you'll be able to go online and get that. Otherwise, the event will start at 6 o'clock for the general public, and you will need to go on our website to be able to get those tickets.
And I will give you more information and put that information out there on how to go about that. The other thing is there is a protest it's called Contatech down in St. Mary's this weekend on Saturday. And hold on, I put my glasses on so I can see where I am writing. It will be from 10 to 2, and they are meeting at Casey Geiger Park and St. Mary's on Greenville Road, and then they're going to walk over to 66. They also have federal contracts and are in the same boat that you are in. So they did come up and support us at the hospitals last week, and we are still trying to get around and support each other. We have to stick together as much as possible. So that's kind of the announcements as far as that goes. And do watch your website, do watch your Facebook page, because that's where we're going to be posting meetings and events and things coming up.
What's the Facebook page called?
Lima Community for Medical Freedom.
Thank you. I don't think, isn't it LimaMedicalFreedom.com?
That's our website.
Oh, okay, I'm like, I've got
But thank you.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute.
Okay, well, we want to thank everybody for coming. Stay together, please. Don't give in and get your exemptions done.
Thank you.